Evening all. I trust we are all well. Volume check, 1 2 1 2. So I'm going to try and actually do some work this evening. That may or may not happen, depending on how many questions we get. But we'll wing it and see. But yeah, as you can see on screen right now, we have hit our first stretch goal. How cool is that? So native VR support is going to be a thing in early access, and I will be working on a VR test build when we do the next demo update, which is hopefully within a couple of weeks. It's not going to be anything special. I'll probably just use, for the most part, Unreal Engine's default VR pawn. Add some widget interaction to the motion controllers, so you'll be able to teleport your way around the ship. I might quickly crowbar in some arm swing locomotion because I prefer that. So you'll be able to roam the ship. You'll be able to press any of the UI screens and they'll just work. And then gaze out the window and look at all the pretties. So it's it's a small taste of what VR is going to be like when it's polished. But at least it's something to to look at, just as a test to see where we're going with it. Thank you, Hello, for the donation. Very much appreciated. Yeah, the teleport movement is literally just the default. We will have a look at various different locomotion methods, and there'll be a selection to choose from, so you can pick which one you want. Me personally, my favorite is arm swing. I just feel more immersed that way. It actually feels like I'm walking around. I know some people get motion sickness with that. Teleport is going to be needed as an option for people that do get motion sickness. But we'll have thumb pad control, arm swing, and anything else that works well. Right, let us go into the engine. I see a couple of questions there. So, will there be quasars and white holes? Quasars, yes. White holes, don't know. I'll have to look into white holes a little bit more. But quasars, yeah. Definitely things like magnetars. Every variation of a neutron star will be there. Yeah, there's a few questions there about VR locomotion. Yeah, we'll have options. So, the more different options we can give players, the better, really. Everyone has personal preference when it comes to locomotion, so more is better. Gun's asking whether everything is made in blueprints. Will it scale correctly in the long run? Yeah, anything that's not real-time, anything that's just a simple event-driven process is quite happy being a blueprint. Anything that needs tick or anything that has any runtime components will be in C++. Thank you for the 2,000 backers cake. Very much appreciated. Ace Cool's asking, since you move space instead of the ship, would you have static space for player versus player combat with ship movement, meaning that no travel to other stars to escape/evade? No, it's the way it works is that obviously because we have a massive ship with loads of simulated infrastructure, there are too many physical assets to move that through a physics state. So instead we move space around the ship because space is easier to move. That doesn't preclude being able to fly around whilst in combat, because every moving object within the galactic space has both a physical representation where its location and everything's calculated from, but then also a visual representation. It's like a proxy of that object. So if you imagine you have your starship as a physical object, if it is flying around, and an alien vessel, which is another object physically flying around, those two objects can bump into each other and do all the usual things you'd expect to do with a moving object. But what you see out of your window is actually a projection based on the relative position of that ship. So those two ships can be completely independent vessels with their own reference frame in the galaxy. So you could have one player on one ship, one player on another ship, and they could both go off exploring in different directions, because what they see out of their windows is relevant to where their ship is in the actual physics simulation. Good question about player agency. Will we have first contact situations? Are we merely observers? Or will our decisions or lack thereof have an impact? Yeah, it's going to depend on the scenario there. So the idea is that, and this will get deeper over time, but at a very basic level, you could come up to an alien civilization and their planet might have two separate factions and they're both at war, for example. So you're free to support one or both or the other or neither. And depending on what you choose to do, obviously that will have an outcome and an effect. And there's not necessarily even a right or wrong answer there. One faction could win dominance over the other or vice versa. And there could be effects of making that decision. And then once you've helped or not helped, that's the state of that system from then on. So you have had an effect on that system. If you leave and come back later, that effect will still have been, still will have happened. So that's saved for that system, and that will be the case on any star system. That's just one example. But we'll have a large asset pool, or a data pool rather, of various political states and plot points and that kind of thing that we can procedurally pick from to create that unique state for that particular planet. Are we potentially going to find Stone Age civilizations kind of going across the gamut of technological capability? Yes, absolutely. So with the way that the system's designed, a planet could be a very young planet that's only just spawned life. So it could literally just be simple bacteria. Whereas the planet could be millions of years older than Earth, in which case the civilization on that planet could be so much more advanced than humans. Even to the point where they are so advanced that we are merely insects to them, and they'll just stomp on us on their way past. So there will be the full range of civilizational development. Scotty's asking, will we have multiple save slots? Yeah, that's definitely on the plan, because once once your ship has run out of crew members, or you fly into a black hole by accident, that's kind of a game over scenario. And you could have spent a long time building that ship up and upgrading its systems and training its crew, and it would suck to lose that permanently through, I don't know, your cat jumping on your keyboard. So we'll have multiple save slots, so you can save at any point and then go back to that save slot in case something disastrous happens. Controller support is coming after the patch I'm currently working on. How large is known space going to be? In Star Trek, only a small part of the galaxy is known due to the speed of FTL drives. The speed is incredibly fast in the game, purposefully so, because we need players to be able to explore the full galaxy without spending the rest of their life getting there. The playable galactic region extends out as far as the dwarf galaxies, so the small and large Magellanic Clouds. Essentially the edge of the galactic halo. Beyond the edge of the galactic halo, stars will stop generating and it will just be void. You can still fly through that void. There's no physical wall stopping you, so you can just watch the Milky Way getting smaller in your rear view mirror. But there'll be nothing out there. What you see from that point will just be a static skybox with distant galaxies drawn onto it. NGM asks, what's the roadmap and timeline? I'm getting a number of overpromise vibes. How many devs are working on this? Right now, it's just me. So everything you see in the demo is what I've made personally over the past 3 years. But I don't know if you're aware, we have just succeeded our base goal on Kickstarter and our first stretch goal for VR implementation. So the whole point of going to Kickstarter was to bring on more developers. And once Kickstarter's finished, we will be releasing a full roadmap, which will consist of the outline of what early access is going to contain, what that's going to look like, and then what we need to do to get there, and in which order we're going to do it in. So we'll outline what our planned patch updates are going to be between here now and early access. So keep an eye out open for that one. Acecool asks, for backers who back enough to design alien civilizations, how in-depth can we design them to be? Well, for the most part, as in-depth as you want. You can be as involved as much or as little if you want in that process. So we'll have a web tool on our website. So once we've got the account system set up, you can go on there and there'll be various sliders for the various stats for alien races. So things like xenophobia, aggression, those kinds of things. So you can fine tune what the personality looks like for your race. And then there'll be various text boxes where you can outline their history, their culture, how their religion works, that sorts of thing. So there'll be a lot of space for you to just flesh that out. We don't want to put a limit on how much you can type in there, but obviously it has to be within reason. We can't have an entire novel's worth of backstory for players to scroll through on their census panel. So yeah, within reason, you can type as much as you want. And then when it comes to the physical appearance of those races, you can draw them yourself, you can describe them. For our concept artists, you could use something like Midjourney, and get some concept art done that way. So, however you want to make us aware of what you want them to look like, that's up to you. And then the concept artists that we're planning to bring on board will then work with you to finalize what that race looks like. And then once we've got our team of character modelers involved, then they will make a physical presence for those aliens, both in person and with ships. And we were talking about how how are we going to make it so that players can play their own races that they've designed? And I think the solution we've come up with is that once you have visited that world and met that race, then that will unlock the ability to play as that race on the sandbox. Will there be a way to build a ship of our own? In the future, we're going to look at having a shipyards expansion, and that will be based on set chassis designs of various sizes and scopes, and then modular building system, so you build on that chassis for whatever ship you want. Because we have things like pipe and cable connections, we're going to have to do it in a modular way. We can't just have a free-form ship designing system, because everything has to line up and work for all the ship systems. Will there be hostile attack? So it's random, such as going to get some rest, and when you wake up in battle, something along those lines. Generally speaking, it's going to be, you will arrive at a planetary system which may or may not be inhabited, and the race that's there may or may not like you being there. And with every alien race having procedural attributes, you could get to a planetary system with relatively high-tech aliens who are extremely xenophobic and extremely aggressive, and they'll be practically attacking you on sight. And at that point, it's a fight or flight choice. You either stay and fight or you run. Diplomacy is probably not going to help with those types of races. How will alien wars be handled? Are they dynamic, alien fleets fight and planets get conquered, or static wars that are in a state of stalemate until the player gets involved? So with the way that the galaxy is generated, essentially it's a series of 100 light-year cubes that we call sectors. When that sector is loaded and you're near it, then it will be doing its background simulation. If you get far enough away from that sector, which at this point is 150 light years, that whole sector is unloaded, so it will stay in whatever state it was in when you left, and then when you return to it, it will carry on from that point. The really deep civilization to civilization interactions is probably version 2 of the alien population system. And right now, to begin with, we just want to get them there, define the aliens, define their cultures, and define their societies and things. Give them that presence in the galaxy, and then we'll build on that foundation with deeper interactions between them. But generally speaking, any interaction between two alien species will be limited to the sector that they're in. So that 100 light year cube, it kind of defines their play space. Phil asks, is it possible or in scope to be a passenger with malevolent intent, messing with a ship to a point that the crew try to find the perpetrator? Can you end up in the brig? Yeah, so we have an in-game faction, which I'm going to try to get right first time, the Society for the Preservation of Humanity, or SPH for short. And their kind of motive is that they believe it's a mathematical certainty that exploring the stars will bring about humanity's destruction, because we will mathematically inevitably meet an alien species which will find our home and destroy it. So they have operatives across the fleet who are working hard to sabotage missions to prevent humanity from exploring beyond Sol. So players can be an operative of that organization, and as such you will have the ability to sabotage any ship system, any component. So So when you interact with it, there will be a sabotage option on there. And when you commit an act of sabotage, a timer will start counting down, like a cooldown timer. And if you keep committing acts of sabotage, there's a greater and greater chance that you'll have left evidence behind. And the internal security person will have a tool that they can wave at damaged things to see whether any evidence has been left there. So you should be waiting for your cooldown timer to always cool down before committing another act of sabotage. Otherwise you're going to get found out and thrown in the brig. Albert asks, no rogue stars between galaxies. Now, the stellar generation region goes out to around about 75,000 light years radius from Sag A. So beyond that region, we kind of run out of seed space anyway. So, we need unique seeds for each sector. And we've only got a 32-bit integer to store those seeds. So beyond that space, it's just literally empty space. There's no stars. But that does include the whole galactic halo. So the whole sphere around the Milky Way will have a scattering of stars in it. Will there be Tribles? Something like it, I'm sure. One of the things you'll be able to do is to bring up physical objects from planetary surfaces. Initially by way of sending a probe down, and eventually, if we hit that stretch goal, flying a shuttle and bringing it back in person. And say you bring an alien plant on board, which could look perfectly innocuous, but unbeknownst to you, it had some eggs on it, and then those eggs hatch, and then the things that were in the eggs are now crawling around your ship and multiplying. Things like that, of that nature. Acecore asks, additionally, the lifetime content option for backing. Does that mean all custom content, i.e. if players get to design and sell ships, we also get those for free if we back on that amount? Yeah, so if you have the lifetime content pass, that is literally everything. So anything that we ever charge for at any point, you'll get for free. And it's also worth pointing out that right now we've got, I think, 9 at the last count, 9 custom ships that players are going to be designing, and all players will get to use those ships, so they won't be locked to just those people that designed them. Although to help keep it special, we will give those 9 people something cosmetic they can do on that ship that only they can do. Something like being able to launch fireworks, or things that are purely cosmetic and a bit of fun, like being able to initiate disco mode, just something like that. So the owner of the ship, the designer, can do those things, but everyone else can play on those ships. Because what we don't want is for, if we sell all 10 of them on Kickstarter, we don't want 10 ships in the game files that no one ever gets to play on. So we think to keep it fair, everyone can play on them, but only the owners can do certain cosmetic things. Can you overload your engines or other systems? Yeah, so right now you can turn the reactor up to 110%, which gives you faster FTL speeds at the cost of the reactor overheating. Right now it just overheats and shuts down, but eventually that will be physically causing damage to the reactor. Blade asks, I suppose we will not encounter the weird floating point issues that Minecraft had when we're going far out, when the point of origin is the spaceship. Yeah, so we do have some floating point issues right now, but I've got a plan to fix those in the next build or so. So at the moment we're moving star systems based on a set anchor point. Now in a small say, an M-class star system, it's not much of an issue. But if you've got an O-class system, which is many, many hundreds of AU wide, then the outer planets are attached to an anchor point that is physically many AUs away from the world origin. So the textures on those planets are jittering all over the place because of floating point errors. But in the new system, each planet will manage its own relative position in space compared to the ship. So as you're approaching the planet, because the world origin is in the center of the bridge floor, actually, because the planet's moving towards you, you're not moving towards the planet, it's actually moving closer to the world origin point. So the closer to objects you get, the more accurate they get in terms of their floating point accuracy. So that kind of, solves that little problem. It's also worth pointing out that the ship itself, that the physics state simulation ship, never gets further than half a light year from the origin point. We built our own world rebasing system, which takes care of that, which is how we're able to fly across the entire Milky Way without huge floating point issues. And it is using 64-bit world coordinates as well. For crew roles, medical/engineering, is it going to be a mini-game or actual handling of Sonic Spanner and fixing the ship? It's going to be a case of waving a tool at a problem to begin with. So you'll have diagnostic tools for whatever it is you want to diagnose. So if we go with engineering as an example, because it's the most fleshed out one at the moment, if you're looking at a pipe, you'll have a plumbing wavy tool to wave at it, and that will give you some readouts as to what's in the pipe, what the pressure is, what the temperature is, that sort of thing, whether or not it's detecting a leak. Similarly, you'll have an electrical diagnostic tool for looking at cables and things, and again that will give you the health of the cable, its resistance, all the pertinent information. Now if any of those objects are broken, then again you'll have a repair version of those tools. So you'll be able to wave the tool at the problem, and then that object will be repaired. Every time you repair, say, a cable, whereas its health will go up, its overall quality level will go down. So you can repair and repair and repair, but because the quality level goes down every time you repair it, the chance of random failures goes up. So at some point, when the quality level has dropped too low, that cable will be failing all the time. So at which point you're going to have to remove that cable completely and replace it with a new 3D printed one. So it is quite hands-on. I mean, we're probably not going to go as in-depth as having to physically unscrew screws with a screwdriver. But, never say never. As we, develop the systems over time and make them deeper and deeper, we'll transition away from waving a tool at something into something a bit more interactive. Cosmic Hal asks, do you have any concept art willing to share? I've got a bunch of scribbles that I've made myself, but for the most part, the concepts have all been done in 3D. So they've not been art pieces, they've actually been getting into a 3D modeling engine and just fiddling with stuff and seeing what looks good. We've got lots of screenshots of that over the years. So yeah, we'll happily share those and have done repeatedly. That said, now that we're funded, because obviously up till now we've had no funding at all, beyond people backing us on Patreon, which we've been incredibly grateful for. Beyond that, it's literally just me with no funding working on this. But now that we are funded, we can start bringing more professionals on board. So one of those is going to be a concept artist. So they'll be doing the concept art for the 9 player ships that we have right now, in addition to the shuttles and things that will be going with them. We'll be getting concept done for alien races and alien ships. So from this point on, we will start to build up a library of concept art. And yes, of course, we'll share that all the time. Lumerius asks, do NPCs in the demo actually do anything right now? You saw them doing role tasks during the cold start, but I'm assuming they're actually not doing anything. Yeah, so that's just a test of the system. So around the ship, in fact, I can probably show you while I'm here. We've got a bunch of dudes in chairs. We don't want those. We want these. So here, these green boxes, these are points of interest. I don't have these ones turned on down here, but this is an example of what they are. So every object on the ship, right down to the lights. So even the lights themselves have got one of these. I don't know whether I've actually hooked up. Yeah, I have. So you can see there that there is this green box which represents the rough dimensions of an NPC character, and a direction to face. So if this light is broken, then this is the point that the NPC will come to and then face that direction whilst fixing the light. And the same here. So right now these ones are just, let me just turn that off so I don't forget. These points here are just where the NPC will come along, stand in this location, and then face the direction of the arrow and pretend to be doing something on this screen. Now right now they're just pretending, but this is a proof of concept of NPCs being able to arbitrarily pick where they need to be on the ship. So it shows that the pathing's working, it shows that they're able to pick an objective, and then when they get to that position, perform their actual role action. Right now, we haven't got a gun in the game, which we took out for the demo because it causes more problems than it's worth. Like, we haven't got a respawn system, so we can't have people going around killing themselves and the NPCs. But you can actually damage these lights, and in a previous test build we had about a year ago now, you could shoot the lights with the gun, the lights would shatter and break, and sparks would come out, and then the engineering NPCs would kind of dutifully come and stand there under the light, wave their arms in the air and fix it. So it's just a proof of concept to show that the NPCs can do jobs aboard the ship, and just the very fact that they're able to do what they're doing now shows that all you need to do is then make them fix the thing they're standing in front of, and that kind of completes the loop. Z0, I think that's how it's pronounced. Would we know where in the world our race is in the galaxy? Yeah, so if you've backed on a tier that gives you access to design your own alien race, you'll also have the tier where you can have your own star system. And the assumption is that your alien race will be in your star system that you design. So you design your star system and you can pick any location in the galaxy, other than a region around Sol, because we want to keep the Sol region pure based on the real science data. We don't want someone parking an O-class star next to Sol and saying that's their custom system. So there will be a keep out zone. We'll have a look at how far that needs to be, but it's probably going to be class based. So M-class stars can be a lot closer to Sol than, say, a B-class star, because what we don't want is to break any known constellations. So that's kind of our line in the sand. When we calculate sort of relative magnitude, or apparent magnitude rather, it will reveal the real-world constellations in the sky. So what we don't want is player-designed star systems to suddenly place an additional star in that constellation that's not there in the real world. Again, M-class stars, it doesn't matter because you can't. Their absolute magnitude is their apparent magnitude is so low that you can't see them anyway at those distances. So we'll play on a case-by-case basis, but you will know where that is, and therefore you will know where your alien race is too. I hope that explained it clearly. It felt like a bit of a waffle, but yeah, ask another question if that wasn't clear. Callum asks, will the demo be updated at all as the game is developed? Yes, not as often as the internal development builds that backers have access to, but periodically, yeah, if there's a new major feature that we've added, then yes, we will update the public-facing demo with that. We're hoping to get early access done 12 months after Kickstarter complete, so we're giving ourselves a year, and then over the course of that year, I would hope to put out 4 to 6 updates maybe on the public facing demo, just so that the public can see that the game is actually progressing, whereas the backers get sometimes daily builds depending on what I'm doing. Ryan Chapman asks, is there going to be cities and settlements and landing on planets? So planetary landings is not our next stretch goal, but the one after. And really that's the one which turns us into the kind of the complete picture. My vision for this game is to be able to land on planets. We won't be able to support planetary landings for civilizations above a certain development level. So the example I give is that on Minecraft you've got villages that are spawned. So depending on the biome, Minecraft will spawn villages. We'll have a few villages in there and a few little houses. Something like that we'll be able to do, but not towns and cities, because that just the relative level of difficulty goes up substantially once you start thinking about vehicles on roads in cities and large crowds of NPCs. So we'll probably make it so that beyond a certain development state, the home world of an alien species is off limits, so you can only go in orbit. And then maybe further down the line we'll add limited landing zones, so on those instances you'll have no control over where the shuttle lands and you'll be placed in a fenced off area. But yeah, if it's tiny villages or below, then yes, you'll be able to walk around on the surface. Just having to scroll down a bit because the chat is scrolling by quite quickly. I'm sorry if I'm going to miss any questions here. I'm probably going to miss the odd one. And also sorry to Claire, because I can see that she is actually answering some, so I'm probably kind of re-answering questions that she's already answered. Sorry this is written somewhere, but will there be space combat in the game? Yeah. So, combat is not the focus of the game. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be combat, but that's not the point. So, the point of the game is to explore the galaxy, see what's out there, meet new cultures, conduct science, do archaeological investigations on long dead ancient cultures, explore ancient ruins, that sort of thing. So this is very much a science and discovery focused game. yes, there are going to be races out there that are aggressive and will attack you. So, you will have to defend yourself. But, with the way the game's designed, you will be able to just turn and run. So, if you choose to stay and fight, you're quite welcome to. But you can alternatively flee and just never go back to that star system. So, if there's a star system with a hostile race and you don't want to fight them, then just don't go back there. Just, make a note. Here be dragons. Don't go to that star system. Caboose asks, are all your static meshes inside a blueprint? Yes, they are, but not all of them, but the pertinent ones are. So things like this floor panel, for example. There's a couple of things going on here. So the floor panel knows what deck it needs to be visible from. So in this case, F deck and E deck. And the reason it needs to be visible from E deck is because if you're, on the stairs looking this way, it needs to be loaded. So that's part of the optimization system. It also has a health value. So every wall panel, every floor panel, every ceiling panel, they're all going to be destructible. So, that can be destroyed and then you'll just have bare framework underneath. Right now, that's just literally bare framework. But if I zoom up to C deck, which isn't even loaded. Hang on, let me load that in. Also need the framework sheet from D deck. That's the floor. Right, so you can see here, this is the new framework design that I've been working on, which has got proper weld lines and proper brackets and things. So those floor panels sit on top of this physical structure. So when those floor panels are destroyed, this is what's revealed underneath them, and the same with the wall panels. So you smash the wall panel, you'll have just bits of plastic hanging off of the brackets, and then all the pipes and things revealed in the walls. So most things on the ship are a blueprint because they are doing stuff, and that's also why modding the game is going to be so difficult, because there's literally tens of thousands of actors on the vessel. Fredichet asks, is there a main quest to solve? Yeah, so the ship has standing orders, and those standing orders are to seek out worlds for human colonization. So you're out there looking for uninhabited Earth-like worlds that humans can move on to, but also to make successful and friendly first contact with any alien races you come across whilst looking for Earth-like worlds. So that's kind of like your standing orders. That's your default thing to be doing. But when you encounter an alien species, then it'll be mixed up by whatever they might want. So they might want you to do something for them to help win their favor. They might want you to deliver somebody somewhere, or they might want a resource that they don't have and you do, or something you can go and mine for them, for example. And those will be procedurally generated in the sandbox. So we'll have a giant data pool of various different things that they can pick from. You'll also have instances where you'll occasionally get a message from Earth, which again would be an objective for the entire ship, which is to go and investigate grid coordinates. So an admiral on Earth might contact you and say, we think there's something interesting here. Can you go and take a look? And that will always be, within your current whereabouts, so they won't send you across to the other side of the galaxy. So if you're purposefully, for example, trying to make your way to Sag A, they'll give you things to look at on the way to Sag A, not off hundreds of light years in the wrong direction. Will there be an in-game system to bookmark places in space and easily return there to make notes and things? Yeah. So on the Helm right now, if I zoom up, get rid of all the naked dudes, you can see here that there are the beginnings of the data entry panel, which I stopped working on when I was working on other things, partially because I ran out of room. So this needs to be bigger to cater for that. I'm probably going to, on most of these panels, make a keyboard that is separate, like a full keyboard, separate from the screens themselves. So you'll select what field you're entering data into, and then use like a keyboard that would be here to enter that data, or your own physical keyboard, obviously. But again, for VR compatibility, there needs to be an in-game keyboard too. And this is where you'll be able to save your current location or a manually entered location, where you can give it a name and a description, and then go back to that whenever you want. Earth will always be the first thing that's automatically there already. You can just press the home key on the keyboard to target Earth, but it will be under your save targets in the future. We don't intend to ever put a limit on how many save targets you can have. It's literally, how much hard drive space do you have for text files? So yeah, that will be possible. Carmen Damaris, hopefully I haven't butchered that name. Does this mean engineers will be able to fabricate replacement parts, plates and panels in the workshop and then install them? Yes. Yes, that's exactly the idea. So if a cable's broken, if a pipe's broken, if a wall panel is broken, then yes, you will 3D print a new one. Now, obviously, the ship is full of panels, including lights, including these panels here. I haven't put the actual join in those yet, but that is coming at some point. But again, this is a separate piece, and that will be breakable, and you'll be able to print out a new one. And like down here, if I go somewhere that actually has panels, it would help if I turned on that level, wouldn't it? Interior walls there. Yeah, so this panel, for example, is a different size and shape from this panel. But in order for that not to get confusing, because there are literally hundreds of unique sizes and shaped panels, there'll just be a generic wall panel. And then when you're carrying that around, you'll just be carrying a crate. And then you'll get to this point. So if we say that's missing, for example, and as you can see, this is all a different shape now to what it was before, different scale rather. So you got a broken panel, you get your box out, there will be like a ghost of a panel when you use the box, and then you just pop the panel back into place. Same with the floor. So you'd have a floor panel in a box, you use the box and it pops the panel back into place with some form of animation for that action. I was going to go down the road of having variations of panels, and we will still have variations of panels, but in order to customize the ship, you'd have to actually physically print out new ones and replace them one at a time. But given how many there are, that would be a really arduous task, so we'll just have that on the ship customization instead. But again, it doesn't matter what style you've chosen, the generic wall panel that you have printed will just become whatever that style is and whatever panel that happens to be. Hopefully that makes sense. Any plans to make a way to view the galaxy in non-visible bands like infrared, UV and microwave, etc.? Not for early access. I mean, eventually, yes. On the bridge, obviously, we've got sort of smart glass, so it does have a display built into the glass, which is why you can see labels and things out in space. So it would be nice if on the Helm you had some buttons for that, or maybe on the sensors console, where you could view things with different spectrums, especially when we implement rogue planets, because rogue planets aren't going to have a local star to light them up. So rogue planets are literally just going to be a black ball in space with no light source lighting them, which isn't, that might be realistic, but it's not particularly interesting. So having things like an infrared view means that you can then see that planet rather than it just being a blank black sphere. But yeah, that's kind of, it's one of those kind of, after we've got to early access, that's one of the things we'll look at as a value add into an upcoming patch. I saw a question scroll past then, which I've lost. I can't find it, but the gist of the question was, are we going to have any other spatial phenomena other than things like wormholes? Yes, and really that's an open-ended thing. So we can add lots and lots of different spatial things over time. Wormholes are going to be the first thing we add, but after that it could be anything. And I think part of that question was, will that affect FTL travel? So one of the things that will affect FTL travel is the mass, or rather the gravity well of a star or a black hole. So the higher the gravity well, the less efficient the FTL field will be. So flying through space, a straight line might not necessarily be the fastest point from A to B. Because if you're flying past a lot of stars, then they're going to be creating drag as you fly past them. Whereas if you sort of weave in and out the stars a little bit, then you'll be able to maintain full field strength and get there quicker. So it's just a way of giving it a little bit more for the pilot to do. And at some point, we need to be able to visualize that as well. So we'll have like a visible gravity well graphic on the display, so that they can see the red zones coming up, so they can visibly steer around them. And that's also going to be how we manage in-system speed limits as well, because right now it kind of calculates that based on distance to target, but once we do it properly based on the gravity of the object, it means that the ship will naturally slow down the closer you get to planets and things like that. And with things like black holes, we want it to be so that if you're practically at the event horizon of a black hole, then your FTL is going to be worth nothing. There'll be no additional benefit from having the FTL engine on at all. So black holes are going to be very, very dangerous things. The closer you get to the event horizon, the less effective your FTL is going to be, until it's rendered useless and you just get sucked in. And to maintain the kind of like the risk-reward balance from that, there'll be a lot of science you can do, a lot of science juice you can get for your science team by conducting scans around a black hole. And the closer you get to the event horizon, the more valuable those science points are. So there's that risk-reward. Do you risk losing the ship and getting loads of science, or do you play it safe and just stay on the outskirts of the disk? Vinay has a good point about making sure each role aboard the ship has enough to do. Yeah, that's actually probably the biggest challenge we have in terms of the role-based gameplay, because we want it to be realistic, and we also don't want to just be throwaway tasks at the player that have no real meaning to them. So what is the pilot doing on a 10-minute interplanetary flight? There has to be something that's engaging for the player to do. The same for the science guy. If the ship's in combat, what's the science guy doing? Are they just sat there twiddling their thumbs? So we'll be making sure that we think long and hard about constantly adding new and interesting things to do aboard the ship. Like with the captain role, it'd be nice if they had to make a log now and then, just to type an update and send it off to Earth. They could type anything they wanted, but it would at least be ticking that box. You made a log entry. But yeah, that would be something that we spend a lot of time sort of ruminating over. What can we give players to do on their per role basis? Streaky asks, what happens if we get pulled past the event horizon of a black hole? Spaghettification, I guess, is the easy answer to that. That's one of those game over scenarios. Someone was asking about this on the Discord, and I think it's a good question, because we haven't really spoken about game over and and what happens in that scenario. So when you leave Earth, you are embarking on a mission of exploration, at least on this ship and the Pathfinder. And it's important to note that other expansions will have a completely different focus, but at least on these ships, exploration is the aim of the game. So you're out exploring the galaxy. You are conducting science. You're upgrading your ship by way of researching new materials that you found, or growing a new plant that you found which is more nutrient dense than the ones you currently have. You're skilling up the ship's AI through doing science research. The NPCs are gaining experience through doing their job. So there are all these factors which make your ship a lot more valuable and upgraded since you left Earth. Now, there are 200 crew members, and they're a finite resource. And as the ship generates tasks that need to be completed to keep it up and running, those NPCs will go off and do those tasks. And when you have a full crew complement, as the player, it's really optional as to whether or not you get involved and help them. You could just go and twiddle your thumbs and let them get on with it, without any real issue. But when you start losing some, then if you're not helping them, then jobs will start to slip. Things won't be getting done. Like a cable won't be getting repaired, and now the ship's starting to struggle. But if you as the player die, then we've got it so that you will then come back and take a place of one of the other NPCs. So to look at it another way, if you have a crew of 200, then you've got 200 lives as a player. So every time you die, you lose an NPC. If the NPC dies, they're lost anyway. So you're constantly working your way through the NPC crew every time you die. If it gets to the point where you've literally got no crew left and it's just you, if you are then the last person to die, that's it. That's game over. And then we get a nice sort of end credit. This is what you accomplished. This is how many light years you traveled. Blah 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 blah. And from that point, you have to launch a new ship with a new crew, starting afresh. The same happens if you fly the ship into a black hole, then that's game over. You've lost the ship, you've lost the crew, all the upgrades you had, you've lost, all the experience you gained, you've lost. So what you would be better off doing is returning home to Earth at semi-regular intervals to restock, repair, replenish any crew that you've lost on your way, and then all of your upgrades are saved, all of your experience is saved, essentially you're going back to hand in the mission. So if you do that regularly, then you're always going out with the same ship, the same crew, with a few replacements for any you might have lost. And that way, it builds value in that ship and value in that crew, because the more you've upgraded it and the more missions you take it on, obviously the more capable the ship and the crew are. So we want to build that emotional investment in your ship and crew, because once that crew is like fully experienced, you really don't want to lose them. But yeah, so that's how kind of death and destruction is going to work in the game. Will there be the ability to have 2 crews in 2 different ships besides PvP? Yeah. So I've spoken about this before. So this ship, the Magellan class, is huge. It's 300 meters long and has many thousands of lights and wall panels and floors and props, and it's a huge vessel with a huge memory footprint, and it's probably, scraping the limits of the engine in terms of object count. So having 2 of them and duplicating all of that stuff probably isn't going to work. So what we'll have is that when you start a new multiplayer game, you'll be able to select how many ships are player ships within that game. Now, if you set that to 1, then you'll have access to the Magellan class and every other ship. If you set it to 2, then you won't have access to the Magellan class anymore, but you'll have access to a couple of smaller ships. If you set it to 3 or 4, then your ship selection is reduced until you get all the way to like only the tiniest ships. So you could have a fleet of 5 or 6 small vessels, and the determining factor there is the memory footprint, and just the logistics of the engine and what's practical. So that's the long answer, and the short answer is yes, you can. Killian Jones asks, will a ship or crew be able to share or sell discoveries to other player ships? So one thing we're planning to do is we're planning to allow players to host their own MySQL databases. And because we're not a live service game, we don't have server infrastructure to manage the sharing of player data. So we're putting that in the hands of players and saying, if you want to build up a fleet of a large group of players with your own ships, then if you self-host a MySQL database online somewhere, then we will give you the ability to enter the username and password in your game settings, and then the game will start using that database for tracking science data, where the ships are, etc., etc. What alien races have been met, and what their opinion of the UN is based on, meeting one of the UN ships. So however many players you have with ships in that, self-managed group, you will be able to see all of those ships on the map, and any scan data that you produce is automatically shared throughout all of that fleet. So you'll be able to have things like text communications between other players, and you'll see their ships in the world as well. You won't be able to interact with them, so you can't board them, you can't shoot at them. They're just like a ghost of a ship, but at least you'll see where they are. You'll see them in the world. So it's kind of a fake MMO, I suppose you could call it. But it is a way, where players can have their own fleets and see each other in the game world. Yeah, someone was mentioning head bob there. Yeah, it's on by default, and in the next build it'll be off by default. So, a lot of people have mentioned it. So, head bob will be off by default in the future. And then if you want to a wobbly head bob character, then you can choose to have one by pressing C rather than the other way around. Conodal asks, will the bridge crew change out with other members of the crew so they can sleep and eat? Yeah, the NPC crew, at least in the sandbox, the NPC crew will have shift patterns. The players won't. Because of multiplayer reasons, basically. As the player, you can choose arbitrarily when to be on shift or not. So if you want to adhere to a shift cycle, then you can set yourself to be on shift or off shift. But the NPC crew, the ship operates a 3-shift cycle, so you've got 33% of the ship working, and the other 66% are either sleeping or doing entertainment things. And we're going to have it so that you can set on actually this panel over here, which isn't there yet. This is the sort of the internal environmental control / crew management station, and on there you'll be able to set the length of a shift in real time. So if you want the crew doing a shift change every half an hour, then that's where you would change that. If you wanted it to be every 8 hours, which would be full time, real time, then again you set that on that console, and then the crew will automatically come off of their shift and the next crew members will come on shift. Carl's asking a good question. How do you plan on working with the Kickstarters to create their start systems and alien races? Will there be some kind of optimized process for that, or will you be working closely with the Kickstarters? The answer is both. So we will have a couple of sort of dedicated channels on our Discord where backers who have got custom alien races or custom star systems can all discuss amongst themselves what it is they're making, and we'll talk with them on a one-to-one basis to help manage that process. I'm going to make an in-game tool where you'll be able to design a star system and change the seeds yourself and actually see visually the outcome of your changes within the game world. So if you pick an Earth-like world and then change the seeds, you can see the continents change shape and all that sort of thing. So you can fine-tune exactly what you want your planet to look like within the game engine. And then once you're happy with your star system, we'll have a web form where you can simply put in those seeds that you're happy with, and then that's the planet we'll build, essentially. It will also allow us to enforce all the astrophysics as well, which needs to be enforced for this, because obviously we don't want people putting ice planets right next to the star, because that's just silly. So when you pick the first planet's position, and again it's going to make sure that it's not going to be ripped apart by tidal forces and that sort of thing. Depending on where that planet is, it will then give you a list of valid options for that location, and so on and so forth, moving out through the system. So it will enforce all of the astrophysics, and it won't let you put something somewhere that's impossible. But you'll have lots of sliders and things for designing your custom star system. So it should be a nice intuitive process, and it'll be a bit like not Space Engine, Universe Sandbox. So kind of like Universe Sandbox Lite, where you can just play with it and build your star system. So, will the NPC crew have conversations, for instance on the bridge, captain giving orders to the crew at their stations, responding with changing course, scanning systems, blah blah blah. Yeah, eventually, definitely. So again, initially, like version 1 of the system is going to be quite how to put it, straightforward, I suppose. Like the captain will give an order, the NPC will carry out that order. There won't be much of a friendly conversation taking place. As we build out those systems and as they get more involved and in depth, then NPCs can then start to have actual conversations. We'll build up huge dialogue trees and things where NPCs can chat to one another. We'll be feeding them information like what is out of the window. So if you're parked next to a gas giant, those NPCs will know that there's a gas giant there. So if there's if you're talking to them, so if you stop an NPC and there's like a multiple choice dialogue, then referring to the gas giant will be one of the things in the dialogue because the game knows that that's what's there. So those are the things you kind of have planned moving forwards, but it will be limited to begin with. Would binary planets be a possibility in the game? If you mean binary stars, yes. So right now, all of our star systems are single star systems. Again, because it's just a proof of concept, just to make sure that the base system works. The next iteration of that will be multi-star systems, and then yes, if you want a binary or a trinary as your custom system, then yes, you can have that. Great question there. What's the state of the lift? Stairs take too long. Yeah, the lift, it's quite low on the priority list at the moment, but it is there. So we will be finishing the lift. Not quite sure when yet. I want to get the sensors finished and I want to get the external hull finished, and then I'll be back to working on the interior. Fubek's got a good question. How will troubleshooting on the ship look like? So will there be manual searching for issues, or is it all automated by computers to find it? So there'll be a number of things here. So on this side of the bridge, there's going to be 2 engineering stations, I expect. We'll have one for propulsion and one for energy generation. Now on here, just bring that up properly. So this is very rudimentary right now. There will be a lot of controls on this screen for managing the holo display, one of which is to select which station you want to view the output of. So if you select engineering, then you will see a 3D representation of whatever's on the engineering screens. So if they're looking at the electrical system, you'll see a 3D map of the electrical system, a 3D schematic. If you've ever watched the movie Passengers, it's going to be a little bit like that. So if something is broken, then it's going to be flashing red. There'll be like a red flashing cable on the schematic, on the 3D display. That's not going to tell you what's wrong with it, just that something's not right with it. So a task will automatically be generated by the ship for one of the engineering crew to go and investigate that fault. And when they get there, they'll then wave their engineering tool at the suspected faulty cable, and it might say that there's a short on the cable, i.e. wires are touching, which is a full fault. It might say that the cable's disconnected somewhere, it might have snapped. So that then at that point there'll either be a wave the tool at it to fix the cable, or it's beyond repair, so you need to go remove it and 3D print another one. That's kind of the initial gameplay for diagnostics and repair. I'd also like to get to the point where we have there's a light flashing in one of the C deck corridors. Go and find out why. So there's a little bit more of an involved process there. So it's like, okay, so the light's flashing. Is it because the light's broken, or is it because the cable's faulty? Is it the junction box that's faulty? So then you can actually do more of a diagnostic investigation to figure out what the actual problem is. Flame asks, I know you've mentioned DLC 3 will be based on space trucking. Will there be an economic system in place before that? Probably not. I say that tentatively because when we build the first expansion, we'll be building our manually created alien civilizations. So the big named races in our galaxy that will be part of our story, they'll all be built out as part of that first DLC, first expansion. There might be some trading and things involved as part of those particular races, but the focus of the player's ship in these first couple of expansions is very much not trading. So DLC 1's all about exploration, DLC 2 is about combat, and DLC 3 is where commerce truly comes into the game in a big way. I think probably not until DLC 3 in any meaningful way. Will there be any consequences if you let problems pile up and not repair them for extended periods of time? Or will the NPCs take care of that? So the way that these things will work is that the ship is constantly going to be generating tasks on a per department basis. So with engineering, there's going to be a big tasks board in the engineering office. So a big screen, lots and lots of tasks. So the ship's AI will be generating tasks based on is a cable reaching a certain threshold of brokenness. So say its health drops below 75%. At that point, a task will be generated for that thing to be looked at. Now, if you don't have an NPC crew, then obviously those tasks will build up until the ship starts falling to pieces because no one's fixing or maintaining anything. Otherwise, the NPC crew will just work through the list. They'll just pick the top job on the list and go off and do it. And when they've completed that task, they'll come back to the job sheet, pick the next job in the list, and then go off and do that task. So it's quite a straightforward process for the AI. They're just constantly picking up new tasks while they're on shift and then going off to complete those tasks. You can either help them or not. That's up to you. So, if you're on the engineering team and you're just an engineer on the ship, as the player, because it's a sandbox, we're making that optional. So, the only time you'd ever be manually assigned a task is if another player is the chief engineer. Because for each department, there are two types of role. You've got the head of the department and then just workers. So if a player is the chief engineer, then they've got the additional option of assigning specific tasks to specific NPCs or players. But that's the only instance where you'll be forced to pick up a task. Drew Bricker asks, will there be a realistic orbital dynamics and astrophysical navigation, or maybe a virtual navigation planner console? We were having a chat about this earlier, and we're definitely not implementing any sort of Kerbal style orbital mechanics. That's really beyond the scope of what this game is trying to achieve. So the way we're handling orbiting and orbital mechanics is that it's based on your altitude above the planet. So if you are sort of level with the equator of the planet, then you will have a perfectly circular equatorial orbit. Now, the further towards the pole you get, the greater and greater the inclination of that orbit will be, until if you're right above the pole, then that's going to be a 90-degree inclination off of the equator, and you'll then be in a polar orbit. So that will be managed automatically, just based on the ship's location. So it'll draw a circle, like a perfectly circular orbit, through the location of the ship, and then the ship's physics state will be moved along that spline, essentially. And then the speed of which you go along that spline, and then indeed the size of the spline, depends on your distance above the planetary surface. So, if you're like skimming the atmosphere, then that's going to be moving your ship really, really quickly in order to maintain that circular orbit. Whereas if you're, say, 5,000-6,000 kilometers above the planetary surface, then you're going to be moving along that spline much, much slower, because you're much further away from the planetary surface. And that's going to be true for anything that's orbiting a planet, from ships, stations, asteroids, anything. Which means if you currently have your ship in an orbit, and then you take the shuttle out and you fly the shuttle down to the planet's surface and land, then that your main ship, your mothership, is still orbiting the planet. So when you fly back up into space, it's not going to be where you left it, it's going to be somewhere else. Now, because both you and the mothership are orbiting the planet, if you're both at the same altitude, then neither of you are going to catch each other up. So in order for you to get back to your mothership, you're either going to have to fly further away from the planet so it catches you up, or fly closer to the planet so you catch it up. Which sounds very Kerbal, but in practice it won't be, because the ships kind of have like infinite specific impulse, so you can just fly towards the thing you want to fly towards. And your speed is always relative to your current orbit. So there will be a speed limit on ships, a sublight speed limit, because in terms of gameplay, we don't want it to turn into space jousting, where ships are approaching each other at like 30 kilometers a second, because we want combat to be like two galleons fighting at sea. So there will be a limit on sublight speeds, but you can just fly around the planet along your orbital path to catch things up. The most challenging aspect of that is if your mothership and your shuttle are for some reason on a different inclination. So if you fly down to the planet at the equator, and then the mothership goes and flies off to the pole, you and the mothership are now orbiting the planet at a 90-degree angle from one another. So one or both of you are going to have to meet up somewhere so that your orbits match. Again, it sounds more complicated than it is, because the game is managing the orbit for you. So you're just flying around, and if you take your hands off the controls, it will be moving you along the spline. Quackers29 asks, are the resources used in repairs going to be taken into account, and when you generally have an ample supply? So when you're printing out new parts, there's going to be a material cost involved. I think for spot repairs, we won't put a material cost on that, because you're just kind of patching up whatever might be broken. But once something needs replacing, then that will have a material cost associated with it. And the ship's 3D printers will have bins, essentially, which have resources. So that's where the mining aspect will come into it. So you'll need to occasionally go out, take your mining craft out of the shuttle bay, go and mine some rocks for a while, and that replenishes all the resource bins for the 3D printers. you shouldn't have to do that too often. Will some broken parts of the ship cause vacuums that will suck you into space? Eventually, yes, but not for early access. I know how we're going to do that. There's going to be... in fact, let's go back down to C deck a minute. And then let's turn off interior walls. So actually, if I turn the interior walls back on. So previously, I wanted to keep all the wall panels roughly the same size. So if you see here, like this panel is offset from this panel because I want all the panels to be roughly identical in terms of their width, which is 2.5 meters. I want every single one to be about 2.5 meters because that felt, you know, a manageable size for a wall panel. But again, the ceiling panels as well are offset to those in order to maintain that width. So what I wanted to do is have distinct segments along the corridors which can have a state. So if I now turn off the interior walls, you can see that now it is actually segmented. So you have this actual contained segment. So the wall panels, the floor and the ceiling are all contained within this one segment. So if we now treat this segment as a 3D piece of space, then this area can have air pressure, it can have temperature, we can have a flag as to whether or not this area is on fire, that sort of thing. And that can spread from segment to segment through the ship. So now that all of the ship is going to split up into actual isolated segments, it means that things like vacuum propagation is going to be much easier to manage. Fire spread is going to be easier to manage. It just makes all of that, you know, easier to implement. But I wouldn't expect that for early access. That's just going to be something we do after. Molan Reich asks, what kind of star classes will there be? Or is there now? Or will there be white dwarfs, neutron stars, Planamos rogue planets? I have to admit, I've never heard of those before. So right now we have all of the main sequence stars. So we've got OBA, F, GKM stars. We will have neutron stars in all of their flavors. So, you know, things like pulsars and neutron stars, they're basically all just neutron stars in various forms. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think magnetars are also just neutron stars, just really angry neutron stars. And things like Wolf Riot stars. What else? There was a couple of others, but they elude me. But yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, so Rocket Man's just mentioning quasars again. Am I right in saying, because I can't remember, that quasars are like really energetic black holes? And if so, are there any in the Milky Way? Because obviously, if these things don't exist in the Milky Way, then we're not going to include them in the game. I suppose, you know, they've also got blazars as well. Yeah, so if it's something... Yeah, so quasars, you know, if it's not something we've got in the Milky Way, then no, we won't be including them. Obviously, we can only include what we've got in our galaxy. Tegol's got a good question. Do you think it's realistic to only have touchscreen controls? Do you want to have them be openable for mechanical backup in case power goes out or the screen fails for some reason? Yeah, definitely. The reason they are all touchscreen at this precise moment is because of VR. So I knew that we were planning to add VR at some point, and I wanted to make that as an easy switch as possible. So by having all of the screens be touchscreens right now means that implementing VR screen usage is really, really easy. Moving forward, there will be more physical controls built onto the touchscreen. So like I had a good example here. So this particular one, if I to find the right screen a minute, so that's you. Right, so if we set the active widget to 1, a moment on that one, and then fix the stupid screen. Too much stuff. Right, so on here, we have a switch between the two input feeds. Now, right now, that's just physical buttons. I'd actually like to embed a physical control, like a selection wheel, in the screen itself, so the screen wraps around that physical object, and then you can like rotate it so it goes clunk, so or a lever that you swing from side to side. Just some way of changing the input feed from the backup feed to the primary feed in a more physicalized way. And then when it comes to things like the breakers, when those breakers trip, which they eventually will be able to do, again, we need some physical buttons where we can reset those breakers. And I also want these panels to be openable. So the design of these is going to change a little bit in the future, so they can swing up. So you can swing the whole screen out of the way to reveal like the bus bars and everything inside, and the actual physical hardware for the breakers, which of course will be a component you can replace and it'll be damageable. So yes, we do have a lot of physical levers and things planned for the future. Once we've implemented VR, and once VR and first person are kind of feature equivalent, then we'll start making sure that we have like physics levers and things working smoothly in VR and first person at the same time. And indeed with future ships as well. So obviously with this ship, everything's touchscreens. I want to implement older ships, grungy trading vessels, where all the controls are physical buttons as well. So it's just different styles of ships that we want to implement. Echap asks, will there be escape pods or vehicles for going onto solid planets? Planetary landings via shuttle, yes, at some point. If we hit our stretch goal for it on Kickstarter, that'll be added in early access. If not, it'll have to come sometime later. We might have to sell a few ships or a DLC in order to generate the funding to bring enough people on board to do that. But in terms of escape pods, the ship's not going to have escape pods as such. So it's not going to be like escape coffins that fire you off into space, just you in a box. Instead, they're going to be life rafts. So they're going to be multi-occupancy lifeboats that are underneath the lower hull. And they'll probably hold upwards of 50 people each. And the lifeboats will have full oxygen supply, full food supplies, and the ability to land on a planetary surface. They won't be FTL capable, so the only practical use really for a lifeboat is to eject them above a landable surface and then have them land. And if you do that, that's a game over scenario. That's what we've had that question a few times. Can you eject from the ship with the crew, and then what? Well, once you've ejected, there isn't much of a and then what. So if you eject and abandon the ship, then that's just game over. Same as before. You restart with a new ship and a new crew. So how will the ship and people on it react to black holes in game? Will they be destroyed instantly, or will everything warp around them? Depending on how close you get. So if you're just like orbiting around on the edge of the accretion disk, then you can just sit there taking in the eye candy without much to worry about. But if you start taking the ship in towards the event horizon, then the rumbling is going to get louder, the tidal forces are going to get a lot worse, and the damage you'll take is going to get a lot worse, and also your FTL drive is going to get a lot worse. So the closer you get to the event horizon, the more likely it is you're going to die. Chances are you might even be destroyed before you even get to the event horizon because of the tidal forces. But you'll get good science by trying, so it's going to be a balancing act. What tools will engineering have available to them, and how interactive will their use be? Will I have to manually cut free a damaged section of hull, for instance, or manually weld the same to repair? So going back to the difference between hull and interior paneling. So the physical hull itself, you can see that it's already been welded together here. This is kind of set in stone. At least for now, this is set in stone. So none of this can be damaged. It's kind of been vulnerable. Everything that's attached to it can be damaged. So for a given wall panel or a pipe or anything else, they can be destroyed. You won't have to cut them out. You'll just be able to remove them via a dialog box. So like with a cable, for example, as an engineer, you'll be able to highlight the cable and then select remove cable. And then that cable disappears from its place, and you'll have a 3D model of a wound up cable in your hands, which will be damaged. And it will say, damaged cable for that physical object. You can then go and take that damaged roll of cable and place it anywhere on the ship, and it will forever be a damaged roll of cable until you stick it in some recycling box somewhere. When you then print out the new cable, you'll then just have a nice shiny roll of new cable. When you take that to the position where the cable should be, you'll see a ghost of where the cable would go. And then when you use that rolled up piece of cable on that ghost, then it just pops into place. So you won't need to physically route the cable yourself. It will just pop into place. Obviously, that's version 1 of the system, and as we build these systems out, they'll get more interactive over time. But we want to start with something simple and then iterate on that simple design. Swags asks, if it's only a game over, then what would encourage people to use the escape raft over just going down with the ship? Yeah, the issue there is providing any meaningful gameplay with the life raft. So they are there and functional simply because we want to simulate a full vessel. So if it's something that a real vessel would have, then of course we have to include it. But in terms of meaningful gameplay, abandoning ship gameplay-wise, has the same outcome as self-destructing the ship. I mean, yes, you're not blowing everyone up, but at the same time, you now are all floating in space in a life raft with nowhere to go. So, there is no more gameplay after that point, which is why that becomes a game over scenario. The idea of being able to redock them with the ship, that's something we could explore. Maybe with a timer, so you've got something like 10 minutes maybe to redock with the ship, or half an hour. But yeah, there's no onward gameplay from that point. Chad Klaus has a good question. If you abandon your ship and restart, would you be able to find previously abandoned ships? If not the actual ship, since it sounds like that might not be possible, perhaps some note or icon about it. I mean, yeah. To what extent becomes the question there? Because we can't have two Magellan classes at once in the game world, you wouldn't be able to board the other ship. So if the other ship is just left floating in space, then it's literally just a ship floating in space. There'd be no way of interacting with it, because in order to board that ship, you need a duplicate ship interior to be able to board. Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. I think that's one of those. We'll have another look at it after early access and see whether there's anything more meaningful we can do if you abandon ship. But simply having it in space waiting for you, that's very easy. Echam asks, we obviously won't have the ability to forge custom buildings on a planet. If so, then this is probably the first space game you can do that. No, you won't be able to do any colony building or base building on planets. That question has come up a few times, but that's not really what this game's all about. It's about exploring and moving on to the next star system and seeing what's there. Hanging around and staying in one place is kind of counter to the goal of the game. Weekday Weekend asks, will each crew member have assigned quarters? So can you go find John Smith, the Shift 2 helmsman, in crew quarters 27F or something, and he'll always go to the same one? Yes, exactly that. So there are equal number of crew quarters to crew. So every crew member, NPC or player, will have their own crew quarters, and that will be their assigned quarters for the life of their game. So they'll spend 33% of their time working, the other 33% of the time hanging out in the bar and doing entertainment activities, and then the final 33% of their time asleep in their quarters. If you were to take it upon yourself to follow that NPC, you could watch them do that entire routine, and then they would be in their quarters asleep, and you could just stand there watching them sleep, if you so desired. That also includes going to the bathroom, eating, drinking, that sort of thing. So yes, each crew member physically has a life aboard the ship. Edward A is asking if this is a single player game. It's both single and multiplayer. It's not live service, so I think a few people assume that this is going to be like Elite or Star Citizen as a live service game. It's not. I guess it's more like No Man's Sky in that regard. So either you're playing solo or you're starting a group to play with friends. I suppose Minecraft is probably the most accurate analogy. Our multiplayer works the same way as Minecraft does. So if you start a Minecraft server, then your friends can leave and join whenever they want. And it's the same with this. So you start a server, your friends can join you for an hour, then go off and have dinner, and then come back and join you for another hour. As long as the server remains up, they can just hop in and out whenever they want. But that aside, it's single player. RM asks, are we able to customize our quarters, and can I watch NPCs sleep? Yeah, if you want to creep on NPCs, you're perfectly free to do so. You'll be able to customize your quarters in the sense that anything you can physically pick up on the ship, you can put in your quarters. So, if there's a vase you like the look of, you can just put it in your quarters wherever you want and it will stay there. We have object permanence anywhere on the ship, so it doesn't matter what you pick up or where you put it, it will stay there and save in that position. So, you could fill your crew quarters with traffic cones and they'll always be there. I don't know where you would get a traffic cone in space, but if you happen to find one, then you can put them in your quarters. Welsh Ball asks, will crew members be able to multitask, like maybe a captain can also repair? The NPC crew will focus on their job. Like the captain might not necessarily know how to repair something, or a civilian scientist won't know how to wire up a fuse box. Players, on the other hand, players can do everything. So it doesn't matter what role you are aboard the ship. If there are intruders and you want to grab a gun and shoot them, then you don't need to be in the tactical team to do that. You can just pick up a weapon and fire it. In the same way that you can go into the kitchen and cook a meal. So players can do anything they want on the ship. NPCs will stick to their assigned tasks. The Three Amigos asks, when crew members are using the bathroom, will they be blurred, a la The Sims, or some other feature to keep it family friendly? Yeah, they won't be pulling their trousers down and getting anything out. We'll probably just have cubicles, so they'll go into the cubicle and close the door, and you will not be able to enter the cubicle with them. And they'll just sit there fully clothed on the toilet and then get up and leave. Kalos asks, is there no movable furniture then? Not that I seriously expected that. To a point. So, obviously the ship's going to have 3D printers, and there will be certain objects you can print out, maybe like a rug that you could put down, or maybe an armchair that you can carry around. I suppose that the best way to look at it is, your crew quarters is like a factory-built crew quarters. So it's not like an empty room with loose tables and chairs that you can move around. They're molded into the design. It's part of the factory unit. So things like the shelves, the sofas, they're all built in to the crew quarters. So those things you won't be able to pick up and move. Anything you 3D print, you can move around and put it wherever you want. On the note, actually, of moving chairs around. So in like the mess hall and the VIP lounge, we're not going to allow players to move the chairs around because NPCs need to come and use those chairs. And we're going to have a bit of an issue there with the chairs in the conference room. Obviously, because if the NPCs are going to sit in the conference room and the players moved all the chairs out of the way, the NPCs need to sit down. So we're going to have a look at that and find a better solution. But generally speaking, if it's an area that NPCs frequent, you won't be able to move chairs. However, if it's a chair, like an armchair, that NPCs don't need to use, then yes, that's the sort of thing you can decorate your quarters with. Will the NPC crew have skill levels? Hang on, it's all scrolling off screen really quickly. Will NPC crew have skill levels and or competency levels? If so, will we be able to fire crew and hire a new crew while docked at spaceport? Whilst docked at spaceport, yes, you can completely change your crew roster, and yes, they'll have experience levels. So I guess it's going to be RimWorld-esque. I used to play Dwarf Fortress quite a lot, and I was incredibly impressed by Dwarf Fortress, and obviously that experience has shaped what our NPCs are going to be like. So I do want a certain amount of personality in our NPCs. The skill levels will be something that they naturally earn over time just by doing their job. So they won't need training per se. Just by existing on the ship and completing tasks, they will gain skill. And the reason to even have that at all is just to create a bit of value in that NPC, so that NPCs that have been on a few missions with you are naturally more valuable and better at their job than fresh NPCs that you've just recruited. So there's more desire to keep those experienced ones around. And what that experience will mean in an actual practical way is speed at completing tasks, effectiveness at completing tasks. So the more skilled they are, the more experienced they are, the more quickly they'll get things done, the less mistakes they'll make, that sort of thing. With players or NPCs, will medical events occur, such as a plague or chemical contamination, requiring decontamination or medical recovery time? Yes. So NPCs in particular will be able to injure themselves and get ill. It's more difficult to manage that for players, again, because this is a sandbox, and players, you can't stick a player in a bed and force them to be there for days on end. But you can with an NPC. So that sort of thing is more relevant to the NPCs. Players, however, can have injuries, and if the player cuts themselves, then they will have depleting health until they get that dealt with in the sickbay. That aside, one of the upgrade paths for the organic 3D printers and the food supply on the ship. In the hydroponics, you're growing plants as a fuel source for the organic 3D printers. That food, by default, will have a certain nutrient density and growing speed and hardiness. You might find an alien plant that has a greater nutrient density, requires less water to grow, and generally grows more quickly. So that's a direct upgrade to your food supply aboard the ship. However, if you didn't do your due diligence and have the science team properly review that plant, then that could actually be a poisonous plant, which no one bothered to pick up on. So now all the crew members are now poisoned because they've all been eating this plant. So the science team will have to use that plant to generate some kind of an antidote, which the medical team will then distribute. That's just one example of where we can go with that. Just catching up on the chat a moment. Welshport asks, will throwing stuff at boarders or crew hurt them, like slow them down for a second? Yes. So every everything on the ship can do damage. If you throw a plate at someone's head, it might do like 1 hit point's worth of damage. If you shoot them, it's going to do 100. So I want there to be a scenario where you could take out an NPC intruder literally by chucking stuff at them. So, if you don't have a weapon and they're trying to get to you, you could just be like hurling plates and things at them and eventually they'll die. Just for the hilarity value. Fishsticks asks, any plans for pets ever? Yeah, so the ship is going to have a ship's cat and a ship's dog. And they'll just be roaming the ship, minding their own business, much like the chicken does. But yeah, I think I would like to, like, if you go to an alien world and say you send down a probe and it's an aquatic world and that probe comes back with a fish in a container of water. Obviously that can then be picked up and walked around with, but as much as you can take that to a science lab and do science on it, when you finish doing science on it, you've still got a fish in a thing of water. So now what do you do with it? So rather than sticking it on some storage shelf somewhere, why not take it to your quarters? And now you've got a fish, a nice alien fish in your quarters that you found. But equally, if you find something cute and fluffy on a planetary surface, then it would be cool if you could make that into a pet as well. And I immediately think back to Flight of the Navigator and that cute little hangy thing. So yeah, I think, again, not for early access, but afterwards, that's definitely something I think would be really cool. Typically Thomas asks, what's the price point of the game going to be? Sorry, I see that Claire has already answered that, but I'll repeat anyway. The base game is going to be free. So what we said when Kickstarter was launched was if we didn't make our Kickstarter target or enough on Kickstarter, then we would have no choice but to go to a paid early access. But fortunately, we have met our Kickstarter goal. I think we were 226% funded the last time I looked, which means that, yes, we are now funded enough that we are happy to release early access for free. So there'll be no cost. And no microtransactions either, because as soon as you say free to play, people immediately assume microtransactions. But no, not ever, ever. And we've stated that repeatedly. We will never implement microtransactions. Echam asks, will the food in the kitchen ever expire if left out for long? Will it become sickly to eat? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, when we actually build the chef gameplay, I think that will be a natural part of that system. Welshbot asks, will player actions be able to affect the politics of the galaxy? Like if a player attacks an alien ship, will it lower the relations with that empire? Absolutely yes. So every alien civilization across the galaxy will have an ID number on the back end, and as soon as you encounter that alien species, an entry will be added to the save file in the background, which will then start tracking your reputation with that species. So if you do hostile acts towards them or you anger them in some way, then essentially from that point, anytime you encounter a ship from that particular alien race with that ID number, they will be hostile towards you, and you'll have to go out of your way to try and turn them around and bring them back on side. Vinay asks, will there be modding support? It's a common question that we get. So, as I've demonstrated a few times on this stream, this is a very complicated ship. So not only do you have many thousands of wall panels, and they're all different shapes and sizes. Just wall panels alone, there's something like 150 to 200 separate wall panels, and they're all just plain white wall panels, but they're all slightly different sizes. So, someone who wanted to mod the ship is going to have to make 200 odd wall panels just to do the wall panels alone. And then you've got the wiring and the routing of the wiring and all the systems that go with that. This is a mental amount of work that's gone into putting this ship together. So to try and approach that from a modding perspective and add a whole new ship, that's a mammoth task, and I think it's probably beyond the practicalities of modding. Now, don't get me wrong, I think modding is good and healthy for games, and I think it can certainly increase the longevity of a game. Skyrim is the perfect example of that. Modders have kept that game alive for many years and enhanced it in so many ways. And I imagine the true's going to happen. The same's going to be true here. People are going to mod the game, and they're going to improve it and add things. And I have no problem with that. I think because we're not a live service game, and the client is fully exposed to players, ultimately it's your game. You do with what you want with it. As long as what you do doesn't affect other players, then who am I to say no? Echam asks, will there be any assistant droids or help bots on the ship similar to R2-D2? Yeah. So, if you look at robotics as it stands right now in 2024, it's getting really good. Now, if you think that this game is in 2261 and how much that technology is going to advance in that amount of time, then we are going to have robotics in 200 years, which is probably beyond what you see in Star Wars. But for the purposes of the game, I think we'll go with Star Wars-esque robots. I won't make them like perfectly humanoid, so you won't have robots like Data walking around that basically look like people. They'll look like robots. But they'll be sentient and perfectly capable of working aboard the ship. Typically, Thomas asks, so what is the price point of the ships? Okay, so by releasing the game for free, obviously the question immediately becomes, well, how are you going to fund it then? So yes, we have to charge for something. So we're going to charge for the new ships that we release and the story campaigns that we release. The story campaigns are probably going to be in the realms of £29.99 because they are full single-player campaigns. They'll be voice acted. They'll have lots of cutscenes. It's a proper single-player game. So that'll be priced accordingly. The ships that we'll be selling. That's really depending on the ship and how big it is. So they'll be priced depending on how much work went into making them. Ballpark, I'd say between £10 to £15, depending on the ship. Something the size of the Magellan, you're probably looking closer to 20 to 30, because you're looking at 6 months of hard work at least to put something like that together. If it's something like Firefly or Millennium Falcon kind of size, then you're looking at £10 to £15, I would have thought. Roughly, anyway. Nathan Wise asks, this might conflict with the aims of the ship for the game, but would it be possible to have significantly smaller ships for single player, or is the aim to use the larger ship with AI for that? No, the next ship we build, aside from the 9 or so player design ships that we'll be building for Kickstarter, I really want to build a small ship, like a 5-man ship. Something, again, kind of Millennium Falcon, Firefly-sized ship, which is aimed at small multiplayer groups. So it's going to have all the same resources and infrastructure as the Magellan class, just on a much smaller scale. So it's going to have a much smaller hydroponics. It's only going to have like 5 crew quarters and 1 person per department. And I think something like that is going to make for a much nicer, intimate multiplayer experience rather than having the huge cruiser. And also for solo play as well, especially if in the cockpit of the small ship, rather than having a separate helm and science console, that's all one console. So the cockpit has the navigation tools and the flight tools all within reach, to make it much more of a single player worthy ship, especially if it's got droids doing all the other work as well. So yes, there'll be lots of different sizes of ship. Zed asks, true voice acting or AI? Well, now that we're funded, when it comes to the single player campaigns, we'll look at voice acting properly, so there'll be actual physical human beings doing the voice acting. Echab asks, will there be lava planets and Arctic specific planets? Yeah, there already are both in the galaxy. Lava worlds in particular are quite impressive. You can see all the lava and all the continents melting. It's going to be amazing to do those on foot with planetary landings. They're probably going to be, both of those planets are probably going to be my favourites, because as much as it's going to be cool walking around a planet which is full of lava and it's all like erupting everywhere, at the opposite end of the spectrum, walking around an ice planet with ice shards everywhere is going to be equally as visually impressive. So yeah, both of those are very cool. Trainhead asks, are you going to be able to decorate your ship with furniture? And if so, how do you get the furniture? Do you craft it or buy it or something else? You 3D print anything you need for the ship. You need a chair or a table or a carpet or a vase. You 3D print it using the ship's 3D printers. I just saw a question pop up briefly there. How big is the biggest ship going to be? That's an unknown, because it's not so much the size of the ship that defines what we're capable of, it's what's in it. So if we take the Magellan class here as an example, it's what we've done so far is running fine. We've yet to fill it with props and 200 fully furnished rooms and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely going to be a logistical challenge as to just how much stuff we can cram onto this ship. And if with all of the planned optimizations that proves to be absolutely fine and not an issue for the engine, and bearing in mind we're using nanites now, so poly count isn't an issue, then it might be the case that we can make ships double this size or triple this size. Granted, there's going to be a huge amount of work involved, and then you've also got the overhead of the bigger you make the ship, the more NPCs you've got wandering around. There is the question of scale, but if you had half the crew and massive cargo holds, then you could make physically a bigger vessel, but with kind of less going on the inside. but that's why we went with a Magellan class to begin with, because I wanted to really stress test the engine and go with something big first, so that all of the optimization is done on the big ship. And then, once we've got the Magellan class finished and polished and optimized and everything's really nice and smooth, when we make a smaller ship, people are going to be getting like 200 frames a second, because we know that the big ship is fully polished and optimized, so little ones are going to be easy. That's the plan anyway. Welshmore asks, will events happen in the galaxy like supernova and meteor showers that will force you to be more careful? So we spoke about supernova in particular on the last stream. Yes, it would be very cool to have supernova happen in the galaxy, but because the galaxy is so huge and because the frequency of supernova is so small, the chances of you being in the same place as the supernova when it happens is really, really, really slim. So we'll probably have it so that, yes, we'll have supernova that happen, and we'll have them wait, so that they'll be like sat there going, wait, hold, and as soon as a player is in range, we'll be like, right now, bang. So they'll wait for you to be there before they go supernova. And that's the cleanest way of doing it, to make sure that players actually get to see it. And in the single player campaign for the first expansion, we'll probably have Beetlejuice go supernova as part of that expansion. So one of the first missions that you'll do on the Pathfinder class is go and watch Beetlejuice go supernova. Chad Klaus asks, are the 3D printers going to have a wait time, or will they just be instant? Yeah, there'll be, I reckon, 3 to 5 seconds per object. It's not just going to be an instant ping into existence, but we don't want people sat around waiting forever either. Echo Zeppelin asks, do you plan on implementing something like a checklist system for complex engineering tasks? Yeah, we were looking at the tablets for that. So right now the tablets are literally just props for the sake of being props. But in the future, it would be really handy to be able to use them for checklists for complex engineering procedures, like the cold start. So as much as we've got the tutorial, it would be nice to be able to pick up a tablet, select cold start checklist, and then just work through it, ticking things off as you go. I think that would be a much more immersive way of kind of learning rather than going through the tutorial. Mr. Mike asks, when will backers get access to the sim? So our pre-Kickstarter Patreons already have access. Now that we're at Kickstarter, obviously we've stopped selling keys. When Kickstarter completes, then anyone that's backed for a key will get a key, or at least access to the dev builds. Because if we get more people than we have keys, then we will use a password system instead to get access to dev builds. Trainhead asks, are you going to do devlogs showing off progress of the game or through streams? Both, I expect. Right now I'm streaming every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 PM UTC. Well, actually, not UTC anymore, is it? It's BST. 8 PM London time on Wednesdays and Sundays. Generally speaking, that's just me working on the game and sort of updating people as to what's been going on. Right now, obviously, because we're at Kickstarter, we've got a lot of new eyes on the game, so there's a lot of questions to answer, and that's great. I much prefer doing a Q&A stream like this rather than questions like building up in Discord or whatever. or on YouTube comments, which we got the actual video I did explaining the game has got something like 1,000 comments on it now. So there's so many questions, but it's much easier just to sit here on stream answering them verbally. So yeah, over time, that's going to lessen. So there are going to be less and less questions on stream, which means I'll spend more and more time just dev streaming and actually working on the game. Yeah, if you say Beetlejuice, 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 it will go supernova. Cheat code. Typically, Thomas asks, so if I understand correctly, if I buy a ship, my friends can join my crew, but can we play if none of us has bought a ship? So the way we're designing it, to try and keep it as fair and as approachable as possible, only the owner of the ship, or rather, the owner of the ship can host a multiplayer game and anyone can join them. So you only need to own the ship to host a game on the ship or to start a game on the ship. If you don't own the ship, or if you don't own any ships, you can still join any game. So only the host needs to own the ship. And hopefully, that's the fairest way of doing it. Welshball asks about escape pods. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. The ship will have 4 or more actual life rafts, and they will hold like a quarter of the crew and be fully stocked. But they are there for completeness sake at the moment and not for gameplay reasons. So that if you abandon ship, then that's essentially you choosing to end the game. Unless we come up with something cooler in the future. Yeah, that's a good question. Will you be able to get crew members to move out the way of a console? Yeah, right now, the NPC crew have no awareness of the player being there. They'll just barge through quite impolitely. When we actually flesh out the NPC system, they won't get in the way of players. If you are stood where they need to be, then they will patiently wait for you to get out of the way. Or if they are already stood somewhere you need to be, you'll be able to nudge them out of the way. James Molander asks, synth toggle for players to turn off food needs in exchange for recharging. The food needs are going to be there for the NPC crew regardless, because that's part of the ship simulation. In terms of the player, it's not going to be an arduous thing at all. The food and water bars are going to go down so slowly that one piece of food and one piece of drink a day is going to be enough. We don't want it to be something that gets in the way of gameplay, although we do want a reason for players to go and use the drinks machine or the canteen or whatever. We don't want those areas and those things to go ignored, so once per day will be more than enough. Z0 asks, will there be a character creator? Yes, there already is. If you press F5 in the game, you can pick a female character and customize it. Noel C asks, where do you get the data for the star systems in the game? So right now we're using the Hipparcos dataset for a 50 light year radius around Sol. We will be switching to the Gaia dataset at some point, where we'll be extending out significantly further from Sol. Everything else is procedural, based on real astrophysics rules. As in terms of how many real world stars are we going to have, we worked out on Discord earlier today or yesterday, I can't remember now, something like 20 million stars per gigabyte. So to include the entire Gaia catalog is about 90 gigabytes worth of data if we're only going with the XYZ coordinates, the name and Kelvin temperature of the star. So I imagine we won't go for so I think it's like something like 1.2 trillion stars. I don't think we'll go for that many. We do want this to be the most accurate real world galaxy ever in a game. That's our goal. You may as well have a lofty goal. And I think the Gaia catalog will certainly help in that regard. But we'll see. We'll see what the data footprint looks like. Evo Assar has just dropped $10 Australian, I believe that is, saying, "Keep up the great job, guys." Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Will crew members have emotions like, if you be kind to the crew, they will respect you, but if you're a terrible captain, the crew will attempt mutiny? Eventually, we could look at things like mutiny. Again, I think we're looking at version 2 of the NPC system there. Things like personality traits. Yes, definitely. That's something we want to implement. Things like moods and health bars and bladders and things. Yes, definitely. So version 1 of the NPC system is definitely going to have a bladder bar. It's definitely going to have a food and drink bar and a health bar. Things like mood. So we're going to have like the cleanliness of the ship is going to affect the mood, and like the destruction of the ship is going to affect the mood. So if the NPCs are walking around the ship and it's not been cleaned and everything's smashed up, then it's going to bring their mood down. Whereas if everything's all new and shiny, it will push their mood back up again. So little things like that. If they're eating terrible food, their mood will go down. And if the NPC mood is really low, then they're going to underperform in their job roles. So there'll be some motivation there to keep the ship in a good shape. I've seen a few people that have said they've just backed on Kickstarter. So a massive thank you to all of those people. Thank you for that. Yeah, a few people on Discord were talking about the size of the install, and I think 90 gig worth of stellar data isn't unreasonable when you look at the size of some games these days. Games are getting massive. I guess the question is that 90 gigs worth of data elevating the game in some way? We'll have to see what that data looks like, because to be honest, not all of it is necessarily going to be Milky Way data either. But we'll have a look. And then we don't know what the final size of the game's going to be once we have multiple ships and planetary landings and all that stuff too. £10 crisp English pounds from Davesoft. You've mentioned Dwarf Fortress and RimWorld. Will we see moral effects from eating without a table or never having a favourite food available? Yeah, I think eventually. Because the NPC crew are part of the ship. we are simulating every ship system as deeply as we possibly can. So it would be a shame to stop short with the NPC crew. Again, it's something we'll iterate on over time. And this is true for every system in the game. We'll start off with a basic version, make sure that works, and then we'll iterate and make it a bit deeper, and then continue to iterate over time, adding more complexity and more features as we go. So whilst version 1 of the NPCs will be quite basic, when we get to version 2 of the NPCs, they'll start to take on more of a life of their own. But version 1 will definitely have their full routine, their full shift pattern, going to the toilet, that sort of thing. That will all be there in version 1. And then in version 2, we can really start looking at likes, dislikes, interpersonal relationships. Like, one crew member really hates another crew member, and if they have to work together on something, then both of their performance drops because you've got two people that hate each other working on the same job. Things like that. That's kind of like version 2 of the system. Yeah, the current install size is 2.8 gig, so it's quite tiny. Great question from Weekday Weekend. How do you feel about people who will be streaming your game on YouTube or Twitch? Some devs don't like it, and others love seeing people stream their game. I love seeing people stream the game, and quite often, we'll actually drop in on those streams, and we'll take part in the stream and answer questions and all sorts. Obviously, the more popular the game gets and the more people are streaming it, and there's only one of me, I can't be in every stream. But yeah, I love it. It's also quite cringy at times because, I'll see someone, like, they'll go out of step on the tutorial and they'll get stuck with something, or they'll have a horrendous bug, and it just makes me cringe, and I just go, oh my god, I can't watch this, it's terrible. It's like watching a car crash. But I think it's important that every developer should watch people playing their game. And I feel quite strongly about that, in fact. If you're an indie dev and you don't watch people playing your game, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because how can you possibly have a feel for the community's reaction to your game if you're not watching them play it and seeing their live reactions to things? The things that make them happy, the things that irritate them. So yeah, do watch people play your game. It's so important. Good question from Zed there. Will older NPCs retire, allowing new ones to be promoted and new recruits to join? Maybe a recruitment drive whenever we return to Earth. I hadn't really factored age into it, and we probably won't again for version 1 of the system. The interface I have in the back of my head is when you return, when you first start the mission, so you're first launching your ship, you will have the entire crew roster in front of you, and then you can customize those characters, change their names, customize their physical appearance, that sort of thing. So you completely set up your crew roster. When you return back to Earth later, that crew roster will obviously have missing sections where you've lost people, and then you'll be able to recruit people specifically for those missing positions. So you can backfill those teams where you've lost crew members, and then you can customize them, their physical appearance and things. But I think when you first set out, you'll have more freedom over customizing things like personality traits, whereas from that point on, when you start recruiting, when you get back to Earth, you might have a selection of people and you pick the one you like the look of the most. Yeah, I think I prefer doing it that way around. Welshport asks, will the ship and crew age with time? Like if a ship grows old, it will start falling apart and becoming unreliable, and crew will become slower and lower success rates in jobs. Yeah, so let me just show you the sort of things that will be happening. So here's a perfectly nice corridor. If I grab this, right, so this is the material that's used on the walls, and you'll see that we have some grunge opacity there. Now we can pull that down and kind of tatty up the ship a little bit and make it more grungy, and this can be on a per wall panel basis once we add that to the custom data on the mesh. So like one wall panel can be all grungy and grimy, and the other ones can be fine. And part of the janitor role will be coming through and fixing that, cleaning those panels, and then that panel will go back to being lovely. Now if we do the same here, so take this one, make it suck, and then this one, and make it suck. So your ship now looks terrible. It's old, it's decrepit, all the various like components and things have got really low quality values because you've repaired them so many times. They're like quality values are like 2%, which means 10 minutes after you fixed it, it's broken again. So that's very much something we want to include in the game. So things will not only will they take wear and tear over time in terms of their performance, they'll also take wear and tear in terms of their physical appearance as well. So the ship will get older over time. And things like with the carpets, now right now we're just doing just a detail texture overlay, but I'll have like track lines in the carpet where people have been walking through it and that sort of thing, just to show wear. Yes, there will be a janitorial role. So again, with the individual floor panels being under the floor here, with each one being its own individual segment, it means that rather than these carpet pieces being big pieces of carpet like this, they will align with these and be actual tiles, and they'll all be breakable and grungeable individually. So as the janitor, you'll go around cleaning and making it all spick and span again, polishing things, and if you don't, and NPCs are walking through this environment, then the morale of those NPCs is going to be dropping because their physical surroundings look like trash. So it's going to have an effect on the crew. Just set that back to... I'll fix that texture in a minute. Did that save that? Yeah, it did. Oh well. Matters not. There we go, back to normal. Welsh Ball says, I guess the lights will start flickering. Yes, they will. So we actually already have that system in place. So if the health value of a light panel starts dropping down, then it will start to fault, and that's based on a sliding scale. So at 100%, it's never going to flicker. It's never going to fail. But as its health value approaches 0%, the chance of it flickering gets greater and greater, and it will start like sparking and various other effects. So you'll get to the point where all the lights are flickering, sparks are flying everywhere, everything's broken. So it will really look trashed if everything's getting damaged. A couple of questions there about crew quarters. So again, the crew quarter modules are going to be kind of factory made. So things like the sofa is going to be built in. It's like a built-in sofa with part of the walls. The shelving units, the kitchen units, they're all going to be built in as part of that unit that comes from the factory. But anything that's loose that you can pick up, you can customize whatever you want. So if you want to go around the ship collecting things like a magpie to bring back to your crew quarters and just put them on the shelves and stuff, then you're free to do that, and those things will stay where you put them. If you want to print out a chair and put that in your room, you can, or a rug and put it on the floor. Pictures, hang them on the wall. So there's many things you can do to customize your quarters based on things you can physically pick up. What happens if you reach the edge of the galaxy? Will you just be blocked by an invisible wall, or will you just continue moving into the endless abyss? Yep, you just keep going. Keep flying until your crew dies of cold or starvation. So right now, we don't have a volumetric galactic disk, but that is the long-term plan. So as you fly up and away from the galactic plane, I want to be able to see, the grandeur of the Milky Way spiraling away below us. And the further you fly away from that, obviously the smaller it's going to get. And then all around you will be a skybox filled with, all the visible galaxies that we can see from here. Pikachu asks, what will be the capacity of multiplayer? If you mean how many people can we fit into a game, we haven't stress tested that to the max yet. We've had up to 13 people in a game, no problem at all. We did have someone on our Discord trying to get 200 people into one game. I don't know how much success they've had with that, but that's, it's... There are 200 crew quarters, so technically the maximum is 200 before you run out of beds. But I imagine you're going to need a fairly decent server with a fairly decent upload to be able to support that many clients connected. Bad Imp Studios asking a very good technical question. The simple answer is that we're not moving the ship. We are moving the galaxy around the ship. So, to quote Star Trek, space is the thing that is moving. Mike Thompson asks, the Milky Way has some small clusters of stars or mini-galaxies around it. Will you include those? If so, wow, yes. So all of the globular clusters in the Galactic Halo will be included, and also the dwarf galaxies like the Small and Large Magellanic Clouds will be included. But that is the limit. That's the the edge of the playable space. L. John Areno asks if there's any tiresome skill trees to have to go through, or will it simply be about the player learning how to do things? Yeah, sorry, Claire's going to kick me off soon. Yeah, so there are no skill trees. So the first MMO I ever played was Ultima Online, and I loved the way that in Ultima Online you didn't have to do any skill trees or anything like that. You just got better at the thing you do by doing it, and that's the model I want to do for this. So, like with the NPCs, the player themselves don't really have any skill trees or anything like that that's needed. But for the NPCs in particular, the engineering crew will have an engineering experience level, and that will simply go up naturally as they do engineering tasks. And the same for every other crew role. The medics get better at medical stuff, etc. And the higher their experience, the more quickly they'll do their job, and the more efficiently as well. So when they repair something, they won't reduce the overall quality of that item as much than someone who has no experience. So experienced NPCs are a lot more valuable than the inexperienced ones. And again, that experience just goes up naturally on its own. You don't have to get involved in the process at all. Welshball asks, will alien life exist in the vacuum of space, like weird fish-like things, casually floating through space, not minding anybody? Yeah, absolutely. I was messing around with a fractal system, like a 3D fractal plugin, which looks exceptionally cool, but is also quite heavy to render. And I'm hoping that I can tweak it enough that we can get it into the game in a performant way, because it means I can have weird 3D fractal-like creatures that are just bobbing around in the galaxy, minding their own business. We can have space-based life forms that have somehow formed on like the rings of a gas giant, that sort of thing. There are many, many opportunities for life to have found a way. I will say that we won't add any life that doesn't have an explanation as to how it's there. So every life form you encounter, if you scan that life form with the sensors, the biological information will tell you, some plausible way of, how that life exists. Pikachu asks, can you tell us anything else about the God mode you mentioned for people who are roleplay fans? So that would be for the GM specifically. The idea is that the GM can spawn themselves as a character and play themselves as that like alien ambassador or something, and just set themselves as God mode so that the players can't shoot them and kill them. But that's just like a GM tool rather than a general player tool. Zed asks, will there be interpersonal relationships with the crew, i.e. romantic relationships, disputes maybe over a task being done, friendships over work and other over hobbies, etc.? Eventually, yes. Again, that's kind of version 2 of the system. Version 1 is going to focus on the NPCs being able to function aboard the ship and run the ship. Version 2 is when we'll start looking at, likes and dislikes and friendships and that sort of thing. Yeah, don't worry, people. We will get back to the cozy dev streams soon. Again, we've had so many new people and so many new eyes on the project, and the game has quite a wide scope, so there's a lot of questions that need answering. So at least whilst Kickstarter is running, this is probably going to be the norm on the streams. Just lots of things to answer, lots of information to impart. But that's fine, because it's I want people to understand what it is we're building, and indeed what it is we're not building. Trainhead asks, is there going to be more in-depth character customization down the line? Yeah, definitely. One of the first people we'll be employing is actually a character artist, and one of their first jobs is going to be overhauling our character. Not just the physical appearance and the uniform, but also the animations and that kind of thing. Make them have proper facial expressions, have facial customization, all that stuff. Weekday Weekend says they got their field power to go to 107%. Yes, that is a bug. We haven't actually worked out what causes it yet, but it's something to do with if you try and turn on the autopilot when you're already flying past your target, then it will get itself stuck trying to rotate itself to face the target. It's something to do with that. And you go into this weird death spiral. Snowy Master asks, what is your favourite part of the ship so far? That's a good question. I don't actually know. It used to be the main stairwell because of all the plants and things. I think my favourite part of the ship is probably this corridor. And it's not finished yet because it doesn't actually have its ceiling lights. But it took a long time to make this because not a lot of people have noticed that that's the continental US there. That's Europe there. You've got Australia there. You've got Africa there. South America there. So, the whole lore and story behind this corridor was that, this is to remind the crew that, they're from Earth. So to have Earth's continents on the walls as you're walking down, I just thought that was a really cool thing to do. So yeah, I think this corridor is the best thing I've personally built, in my opinion. I haven't actually finished either, because if you come and have a look, the edges are still not chamfered yet. So once I've smoothed off the edges like these ones, it'll look a lot nicer. It will pick up the light more. Wake Roberts asks, will there be teleporter technology or just shuttlecraft? Yeah, we're sticking to just shuttles. Teleporters are a little bit beyond accepted theoretical science, but we're trying to at least stick to theoretical science as much as possible. And teleportation is kind of way out there in terms of what's possible. Plus, there's that whole, are teleporters actually suicide booths? Are you killing yourself and appearing as a duplicate? It's there's such a hot debate over what teleporters actually are that we're not including them. At least not yet. Perhaps there's going to be an alien species out there that will use them, and then perhaps one day we can kind of learn their tech, but certainly not yet. We won't have teleporters anytime soon. Will we be able to hire alien crew? Yeah, that is the plan eventually. Once we have physically embodied alien species, then if you encounter one and you have a crew slot that you need filling, then you'll be able to invite them to join your crew once they have a physical presence. Welshbot asks, do you plan to stream when the game is fully released? Oh yeah, absolutely. Just because it's released doesn't mean I'm not working on it, so I will be working on this game for many, many years to come. Yep, the game is absolutely going to be free. It's the same model as DCS World, I believe, where the base sandbox, the base game is free, and then things like ships and story campaigns are paid content. Like I said in the last stream, I wouldn't be comfortable charging for ships if I was also charging for the game. That doesn't seem right on so many levels. So it's a case of one or the other. So we're giving the game away for free, but we're charging for the ships. Trainhead has a good AI question. It says you use AI for voiceovers in the game on Kickstarter. Are you going to use AI generated stuff or anything else? Well, right now we're using 11 labs for the tutorial voice, because we haven't been able to afford the voice actor. And as much as, yes, that's an AI voice, it's still me speaking the words. So something you can do on 11 labs is you can actually speak the voice dialogue, and it will just make your voice someone else. So that's how I'm doing the tutorials and things. So technically it's me, but yeah, it's an AI voice generation. In terms of other AI generated content, yes, that is a really, really hot debate right now. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to what AI actually is and actually is capable of. There are a lot of questions over things like the legality and legitimacy of training data. So, it's not something that we're going to throw ourselves into blindly. I do think that an LLM-driven NPC dialogue system would be phenomenally good. To be able to just chat casually to one of the crew members and have them talk back to you naturally using natural language would be amazing, especially if we're feeding that dialogue system with facts about the ship, like how fast it's moving, where it is in the galaxy, what's outside the window. We can really drive that conversation and give that knowledge in the background. But if it's something like ChatGPT, for example, one, there's a lot of question over the training data. Two, it's very expensive on tokens. And three, you need to be online to use it. So if there is a responsibly sourced model with proven responsible training data that is lightweight and runs locally on the client, then yes, that's the sort of thing that we would use for our NPC dialogue. Yeah, and I think I guess that's it. So we're not going to implement AI generated anything until the technology has matured a little bit and it's more clear on where the data actually comes from. And the other aspect of that is that we have an entire galaxy filled with alien civilizations, and I don't know how many alien civilizations there are going to be, even, because the procedural algorithms are generating where life will be. So I haven't got a clue where they'll be. Now, if we say a ballpark figure, let's say there's 10,000 alien civilizations across the galaxy. You're never going to give all of them truly unique content with truly unique artwork, etc., etc. But with AI, you can. But again, it's not a case of just throwing an AI model at the problem. That AI model has to be responsibly sourced and specific to the task and running locally. So if you could send a probe down to an alien planet, and then it could bring you back a picture frame with a painting in it, and that painting could be a painting that was painted by an alien on that world, and that could be part of their historical record, and it's unique across the whole galaxy. And then you can hang that painting on the wall in the ship, and then you've got this unique thing from this unique alien race. And yes, it was generated by AI, but if everything, what's another way of putting that? If the AI technology has matured enough that sort of thing is viable, then yes, I think that would be really cool. But only when the technology is mature enough. I think that's our stance on it, basically. Ethan Beatty asks, how will the weapons work? Will they be laser-type weapons or actual bullets, and will they manually or automatically controlled? The ship will have it's a dual-mode weapon turret. It has beam lasers and it has railguns. There's a room above and below the weapon turrets, and in that room is all the capacitor banks to power the weapons, and also some magazines for loading in the railgun slugs. There'll be 3D printers to print out the railgun slugs, and loading them into the magazines will be one of the tactical team tasks. Generally speaking, I imagine you'd probably just let the NPC crew deal with that. The way that we've just sort of picture the combat working is that shields are largely impenetrable by traditional means. They kind of work like non-Newtonian fluid, so the harder you hit them, the harder they are. So things like railguns or coil guns, as someone pointed out, the slugs are just going to ping off the shields. However, a directed energy source is going to drain the capacitors that are generating the shield. So the idea is that you take out the enemy shields with the beam weapons, and then once the shield's down, you switch to the railguns and pummel their hull. And because all the ships are full of actual simulated systems with actual wires and things, where you take damage matters. So you could get a lucky hit and take out a critical system simply because you hit them in the right place. The ship's AI will handle the targeting of the weapons, so you won't need to physically move the turrets. The ship's AI will do that. But what you'll be doing on the tactical console is painting targets for the ship to aim at. So you'll have targets of interest on the enemy ship. You'll pick the ones that you think make the most sense to shoot at tactically, and then the ship will dutifully fire at the thing that you've picked as your target. Obviously, you've got the auto fire or manual fire kind of buttons that you'd expect to have on the tactical console. Okay, so last couple of questions, because I'm starting to lose my voice. Geronimo asks, will there be any sort of economy in the game? Could you, for example, be a trader in a sandbox and interact with the economy in any way? Maybe some sort of piracy? Yeah, all of that is planned for our third expansion. And in that expansion, you will be running your own space shipping company, your own space trucking company. And you'll start off just working around the Sol system with a non-FTL ship. And then you'll work your way up to bigger and better ships until finally you get FTL capable ships, and now you're trading between star systems. So all of that, along with the piracy, is planned for the third expansion. And we also want that to have like a cops and robbers in space kind of feel to it. Will there be bases we can visit across the solar system, like on the moon or Mars? Eventually, yes. So again, when we make the third expansion, the Sol system needs to be very, very fleshed out with infrastructure and stations and settlements and things, because you need all those locations to be trading between. To begin with, there's not going to be much there. We'll start off, building all the celestial objects. We'll start looking at catalogs and including things like, Halley's Comet and stuff. Then we'll look at orbital stations next, and then we'll look at settlements on the moon and Mars. Yeah, Trainhead, that's kind of our position here, is that AI has the potential for a lot of very, very cool things. And I think we're making the game at the right time to be able to take advantage of those things when the time is right. Right now, the technology is still too young. There's still too many unknown factors. There's still a lot of negative reaction to AI in the community at large. Some of that's justified, some of that is a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of how it works. But either way, there's still a lot of debate over AI and the pros and cons. So I think we're not going to be touching it until those things have settled, until the technology is established and the training data can be trusted and the technology is well refined. Okay, I think on that note, I'm going to call it a night there. So thank you to everyone that's asked questions, and again, thank you to everyone who's backed us on Kickstarter. I haven't looked at it for a while, so do we have it here? What are we on now? Blimey, that's got up loads since I last looked at it. Honestly, you guys, it's absolutely incredible. We are now halfway to planetary landings, and that is particularly cool. If we can get to planetary landings in the next 22 days, that would be phenomenal. And for me, that's it. That's the full, complete picture of what this game needs to be. So, yeah, planetary landings. That's what we need. Okay. So once again, I never know how to end a stream, so I will simply say thank you, everybody. Tune in on Sunday evening at, again, 8 PM London time for the next stream. And again, it's either going to be a Q&A stream, like this one turned out to be, or it's going to be me working on the game, depending on how many questions we get. So thank you all, and I shall see you on the next stream.